Alright, so I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Darren, 54 years old, and I've been married to Caroline, who I call Kaz, for 28 years. She's 55. When I met Caroline, I was 24 and teaching art at the local high school. No, we're not Americans. We live on the Yorkshire coast in northern England. I remember the first time I saw her. She was wearing a short skirt, and I remember thinking, I never realized I was a leg man. She had the most amazing legs, and even though she was just a B cup, she had this way of arching her back that made her look so full. She was so happy and bubbly, always laughing and giggling. I thought she was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, but she never believed she was beautiful. I did, and I planned to spend the rest of my life making her feel beautiful. She just couldn't see what I saw. She saw a round face and a bit of a big nose. I saw her beautiful blue eyes that turned green when she cried watching sappy movies. I saw her gorgeous smile and her curvy lips. I saw perfection. I'm tall, 6'4", so I towered over Kaz, who's 5'4". I have black hair, now peppered with gray, and green eyes. I'm still good looking, people tell me. Kaz doesn't compliment me much. She figures I know I'm still good looking. When we first met, she called me Clarky because she said I looked exactly like Clark Kent with my black hair and glasses. So it took a while to convince her to go out with me. I always remind her that I loved her longer than she loved me. But when we finally got together, it was love. We got engaged after 3 months, I know, crazy. We got married the following year, but I never had any pre-wedding jitters. I was just in love. Simple as that. She's not perfect, but neither am I. She has a terrible temper and can be selfish, but she's perfect for me. 28 years later, we celebrated our son, Scott's 21st birthday. We struggled a bit to have him. It took years, and we could never have another. That's something we still grieve. But we can't complain because some people never get blessed. And Scott is truly a blessing. He's the kind of son any man could be proud of. He's the kind of kid you can take anywhere. Now that he's grown up, he can talk to anyone and make them feel at ease. He's got a great, captivating sense of humor. From babies to old folks, Scott charms them all. Scott and I are very close and have the same sense of humor. He'll often say what I'm about to say before I even get it out. We spend a lot of time together, and he considers me his friend as well as his dad. I know you're supposed to be your kid's parent, not their friend, but I hope I've managed to be both. How could I not want a smart kid like him as my friend? We may be very similar in personality, but we don't look alike at all. All dads want their sons to look like them. I think it's some Neanderthal thing, but Scott doesn't. Kaz's family has incredibly strong genes. They all look alike. Kaz and her cousins look more like siblings. Scott looks like his mother, like me, and everyone else in her family. When we were babysitting Kaz's sister's kids, our nephews, we could never convince strangers that the 3 cousins weren't siblings and that Kaz wasn't their mom. We enjoyed those times with the nephews because it gave us a glimpse into what life might have been like with a bigger family. Oh, a bigger family wasn't meant to be. We're lucky we don't have to worry about money. We like spending time together. Kaz and I never understood couples who spend weekends apart. We often see our neighbors taking turns going out with friends while the other one watches the kids. We love spending time with each other. We're that kind of couple. I still love her as much as ever, and I find her very attractive. She definitely doesn't look her age. We both look like we're in our 40s, not our 50s. This is helped by the fact that Kaz still has not a single gray hair. Another family trait, because her dad was the same way. Their hair just gets lighter rather than turning gray or white. The only real blemish in our marriage in recent years has been a bit of a bedroom lull. We always had a very active sex life. Kaz only had one boyfriend before me, and even though she wasn't a virgin when we met, she was pretty inexperienced. But I was busy in college, and Kaz was very quick to learn and was surprised by how much I had to share in terms of skills. One of the things I'm most into physically is oral sex. I love it. I guess it's my thing, being a bit of a word nerd. We never got intimate without Kaz reaching the limit of my tongue, never. I was surprised that she'd never done it with her previous boyfriend. Apparently, he thought it was dirty. I think it's the most wonderful thing a man can do for a woman, and any man who doesn't do it is pretty suspect. In recent years, ever since Kaz went through menopause, her interest in sex has completely evaporated. Penetration is painful, and she complains about my girth. I don't want to hurt her, so I continue to give her oral sex. We both enjoy it, but it's rarely reciprocated. However, soon enough, any sexual contact became infrequent. This was very upsetting for me and caused some frustration in our marriage. I guess it made me feel less like a man and less attractive. Kaz would just go into her famous temper tantrums whenever I tried to broach the subject, which I found very difficult because not only do I find her very attractive, but I still have the sex drive of a teenager. So at 54, I'm still having to control myself, so to speak, on a daily basis. Apparently, that's quite necessary for a healthy prostate. Anyway, I loved her so much that I reluctantly learned to live with it. It hurt, but I wouldn't walk away from our marriage. Loyalty and trust are everything to me. I had an older colleague, Trevor. He was in his 50s at the time, and he had just gotten divorced. He was drunk at a staff party, and I was assigned to take him home. His home was now a small, rather empty apartment, and over coffee he told me his story. He loved his wife, but when he started experiencing erectile dysfunction, she decided to satisfy her needs elsewhere. She considered it completely separate from their loving marriage, and she seemed utterly shocked when Trevor divorced her. Trevor's ex-wife now lives alone in a different apartment, still shocked that her lack of marital fidelity could have led to her new life. Sadly, a simple change in blood pressure medication later solved all of Trevor's issues in that department. Too late for his first marriage, but just in time for his second marriage to give him a very happy retirement. I could never cheat on Kaz, just to satisfy my sexual needs. My beautiful Kaz gave me a wonderful son, a home, and memories. I owe her that to handle this new stage in our lives with love. One of the things Scott and I share is a love of genealogy. We were delighted to find that we're related to royalty. That's right, my 30th great-grandfather was a king. Yeah, I know, along with thousands of other people, but it's still exciting. We have literally thousands of names on our family tree. Kaz doesn't care. She says it's just a list of dead people. We've tried to get her interested, but she's just not that into it. When I got my DNA test kit years ago, I offered to get her one of her legendary tantrums. She was very opposed to it. She said they would know all about me. I'm not really sure who this large they is or what they would do with information about a fairly ordinary high school teacher. Anyway, I let it go. It's become my thing, and it's okay to have separate hobbies this time. Anyway, a few years later, Scott and I still occasionally go on the genealogy website, especially after an exciting notification pops up. Our interest waned a bit after we realized we weren't going to find any more famous relatives. Scott enjoyed checking my DNA matches from all over the world. They were starting to pop up more frequently as more people joined. I guess my Irish ancestry ensured global matches. Lots of people got scattered after the potato famine. So I decided that, as a little extra gift for Scott's 21st birthday, I'd buy him a genealogy DNA test kit. The fact that it was on special may have helped. I was a bit busy in the run-up to his birthday, so I ordered it a bit late. When it finally arrived a few days after his birthday, we quickly completed it, and I sent it off to the lab. I didn't mention it to his mother because I knew her feelings about these things. Besides, it was one of my things with Scott. I certainly didn't want another they incident, because who would look after Scott now? I realize that everyone out there already knows what's coming next. It seems obvious, doesn't it? And you'd be right. All I can say is it wasn't obvious to me. In fact, I couldn't have been more shocked when I came home one evening, a few days later, to find my life as I knew it over. Kaz was sitting on the couch in the conservatory, crying like her heart was actually breaking. My first thought was to wonder who had died. I ran to her and took her in my arms. She couldn't speak for a moment, so I just held her, begging her to tell me what was wrong. Finally, she stammered that she'd been talking about recycling and had seen the cardboard box that the DNA test kit came in. By this time I was starting to feel a bit nauseous. This was an overreaction, even for Kaz. I started to panic and felt like my stomach had hit the floor. I could barely comprehend it when she said, "It's yours, Darren. Yes, you're his dad, but someone else got me pregnant. I did it for us, I swear." Silence seemed to engulf me for a second until I found myself gasping for breath. I rushed to the conservatory door and took my lunch all the way down the steps into the garden. Kaz actually patted my back as I was sick, comforting me as if she cared. I finally calmed down enough to turn to her, and I yelled at her. "For us?" "Yes, for us to be a family," she whispered. Then old Kaz came back, and she shouted, "It's been a long time, Darren." I knew I couldn't talk to her calmly. I was too angry, but I couldn't leave until I knew more. "You heard the doctor, Kaz. You heard him say there was nothing wrong with either of us. There was no reason why we couldn't have a child. My swimmers may not have been Olympic standard, but they were perfectly normal and capable of doing their job. So there was nothing wrong with me either. I know one of my ovaries wasn't working properly, but the other one was fine. That's why they didn't intervene sooner. We just needed time. I was running out of time, Darren. I wasn't fine. I kept thinking about what the doctor said about my ovaries. I thought if I got a better sperm donor, I would improve my chances. So, Clark Kent's sperm wasn't good enough for you. You decided you needed Superman to do it with his superhuman sperm. So where did you find that? She looked at me with shock. Where? I yelled. It was Angus, she whispered. I don't actually remember leaving the house. I know logically that I had to walk through 2 rooms and down the hallway to get out of the house, but I don't remember it. What I remember is that if I hadn't left at that point, I might have done something I would regret later. I roared out of the driveway and finally pulled up in a quiet cul-de-sac. In the off-season, it was practically deserted. Angus. As if my best friend, my best man, and the closest thing I have to a brother in the world could do this to me. She might as well have stabbed me. Angus and I had been friends since we met at university when we were both 18. We were both art students. I was on the teaching course, but he switched to art restoration. Wherever we went at university, people assumed we were brothers, not roommates. We had the same build and coloring, though my eyes are a paler green than his. He was an inch shorter than me. We shared a room, so I also knew that he was an inch or 2 shorter than me in other departments. Why am I thinking about that? Typical man, a little bit of comfort knowing that now, I guess. We were inseparable friends at university. He was my best man, and then I was his best man. Kaz and Angus didn't actually meet until a couple of weeks before the wedding because he'd been living in France for a year working in a gallery and owning his restoration skills. Kaz laughed when she met him, saying we must have come from the same mold. He was excited to be back after 2 weeks to attend our wedding because he'd met Kate just a few days before. How she later became his wife. He'd really fallen for her, just like I'd fallen for Kaz. See, I told you how alike we are. He was home visiting his parents on the Lancashire coast, and he'd met Kate at their church. His parents and Kate are part of what I call the happy-clappy kind of reborn church. He's a member, but he definitely didn't let it get in the way of his drinking at the student union bar. However, he was a member of the Christian Union, and I knew he was still a virgin and intended to remain that way until he got married. When he later married Kate, I knew they both were virgins. I knew he was worried about it the morning of his wedding, so I tried to reassure him. Worry and virginity do not make for a fulfilling honeymoon as I imagined. Anyway, at the wedding, his family all thought I was his brother, not his 3 actual brothers who were there, because I looked the most like him. I'm an only child, so this bond with Angus was very important to me. I cherish it. He's truly the closest thing I have to a brother, and has been my friend for 37 years. I love him. Kate and Angus have had 4 children, 3 girls, Rachel, Ruth, and Ryan, before we had Scott. They had their son, Jake, 6 months after Scott was born. As an only child, I loved being Uncle Darren, both then and with Kay's 2 nephews. Even though they live on the opposite coast from us, only a couple of hours away, we tend to visit them because we only have 1 child to shuttle. Scott loved being part of this big family, and we got together for holidays and high days every couple of months. Jake and Scott are best friends too. They're both into anything to do with transport, just like me, a bit. Angus isn't into it, so I took the boys to lots of car museums, bus rallies, and vintage car shows. It's our thing. Angus and I talk every week and then text and more recently share daily jokes and memes we find online. Kate's a bit of a weirdo. I genuinely like her, and I can always make her laugh, but I sometimes find her a bit rigid and uptight. Harry Potter and Halloween were off limits because of their religious beliefs. She's been insistent that Angus should be more involved in church. Sometimes I think she's a bit harsh on Angus when it comes to the kids. For his 40th birthday, she actually had a go at him before his party about something trivial. After the party, we actually came home a day early. See, I wanted to protect him, but I knew better than to get involved between a husband and wife. However, she knew it annoyed me, and she said she felt she could vent in front of me because I knew him. Everyone else thinks he's perfect, but only you and I know he's perfect and all. Sitting alone in the car, I realized I didn't actually know my closest friend at all. The fact is, I have no old friends. The two people I trusted most in the world had betrayed me, and I was left with Scott. But what if he didn't want me either? I texted Scott immediately. I needed to see him before he saw Kaz. I needed to tell him that whatever happened, he'd always be my son, and nothing could change that. I could only trust that he'd feel the same way about me. We had managed to buy a couple of rental properties, and he lived in one of them. He looked worried when he first saw me approaching his small flat and immediately said, "Dad, you look terrible. Are you ill?" When he came to hug me, he pulled back. "Are you sick? You smell. What's going on?" I relayed what had happened as best I could, and told him how much I always wanted to be his father before I started sobbing. He took my face in his hands as if I were the child and he was the parent, and said, "So you're the greatest dad, the only dad I've ever known. I don't even want to know who that other man is. I don't need to know. He doesn't mean anything to me. He doesn't matter. I never want to meet him." He must have seen me recoil at what he thought was reassurance. "You've met him, haven't you, Dad? I can see it in your face." I could only nod. "Who is it?" "Uncle Angus." "The bastard. I'm going to kill him. You stay here. I'll have a word with Mum." I washed up as best I could. I needed to be strong for him now. I couldn't get rid of the feeling that just a few hours earlier, my life had seemed perfect. Now it was all a lie. Every foundation on which I built my life had crumbled, except for my love for Scott. After I'd showered, I put on Scott's sweatpants and a t-shirt. They were a bit tight, but I knew he wouldn't mind. He came back less than an hour later. He was fuming. He also had a small bag of my clothes. "I told her you're staying here tonight, and she has until time tomorrow to pack her stuff. She can move in here, and we'll go back home. Why shouldn't you be in your own bed, just because she wanted a taste of someone else's? I'm not letting you stay alone, Dad, and the way I feel about her right now, I doubt I'll be talking to her for a while." "What else did she say?" "She said she loves you, and we'll get through this as a family. She's delusional, Dad. She's lost her mind." "I know I can never forgive her, right? I don't care if it was just once because she felt desperate. She's been deceiving me and lying to me every day for over 20 years. I can't forgive that." "You'll need to talk to her yourself, Dad, although I don't think anything's going on. From what she's been saying, it sounds like there's definitely more than just the one time. I gave her the spare key so you can come back home after school tomorrow as usual. I'll meet you there. You're going in as usual tomorrow, right?" "Probably not, but it's the pre-half-term training day, so I'll have to fake it. They get really shirty if you're off sick or anything on the day before we break up for the holidays. They think we're faking it to get cheap flight deals." Scott handed me the bag and said, "Dad, I think I got everything you need here, but if there's anything else, just take it." Mum was very reluctant to let me take anything, but I didn't give her much choice. "So I'm sorry I'm not going to be here when you wake up, Dad. I have to start early, but I'm just a phone call away. We'll get through this, and I'll be with you every step of the way." I was so proud of this young man. I looked at him and whispered, "I'm here to support you. That's my job. Dad, you've always looked after me, and now it's my turn to look after you. I won't lie, I'm shocked and angry. The only difference is I haven't lost anything. I still have you, and Mum's still there if I choose to accept her. And that's my decision, and I don't know what that's going to look like yet. I really haven't lost anything, but you have. I promise you, you'll never lose me." See what I mean? How could you not love this kid? I actually managed to get some sleep, which surprised me. I heard Scott leave around 4 a.m. I knew it was early, but I didn't think it was that early. I managed at school, but just about. I didn't really take anything in from the training session, and when I was asked a question, I had to blag it. I got away with it, but my closest colleague, Graham, asked me if I was okay during our tea break. I told him I thought I had a migraine, and he agreed I didn't look well. We finished at 4 p.m., so I wandered around the nearest supermarket for a while. I didn't want to go home and find Kay's still there. At 5:15 p.m., I turned into the driveway but saw Kay's car parked in her usual spot. Great. I almost turned back again, feeling that fake migraine might become a reality soon. Oh well, I guess I had to find out the truth sooner or later. It might as well be now. Kaz greeted me with a smile. "I didn't expect you to be here," I said quietly. "I know I promised Scott, but I needed to talk to you first." "Yeah, well, you've proven that promises from you mean very little." "Let me explain. Then I'll go to Scott's, I promise. I know you've been completely shocked, but I need to explain. Okay, I want the whole truth, Kays. I can't promise it will make any difference, but I promise you if I find you've hidden anything, I'll never speak to you again. Have you talked to Angus? Kaz asked. Why would I want to talk to him? Well, I just wanted you to know I haven't told him you know. I wanted to talk to you first. Thanks, I guess it was a bit tough putting me first for once. So, the floor is yours. I'll try my best not to interrupt. You know how desperate I was to have a child. I cried for months on end. You held me and reassured me, but it wasn't enough. I was desperate to have a child. You see, Angus was perfect. He looks exactly like you, but in the end, that didn't matter because Scott looks so much like me. I couldn't risk it, you see. He looks so much like you and he's fathered 3 daughters. Kate told me that he just has to look at her, and she gets pregnant. So, exactly how did you broach this subject with my best friend? Hi Angus, it seems your dearest and oldest friend isn't doing a great job of getting me pregnant. You've been challenged and tested in the child-making department. Fancy giving it a go? Darren, it wasn't like that. He knew you felt you were letting me down. He knew how heartbroken you were. He only agreed to help us because of you. He just wanted to help. You mean to help your wife get knocked up? No, not like that. He was just the donor. The first time we met in a hotel, definitely not for intimacy in any way. We were going to use the turkey baster method as planned. He'd go into the bathroom, shower, and do his thing. He said being in the bathroom would help. I'd go to the door, and he'd give me his stuff. And he promised to stay out of the room until I was safely in the clear. We'd see less of each other's bodies than we had on the beach or by the pool in the past. It felt weird and very sterile. I started to question whether this was how I wanted to create a child for us. I lay on the bed, but I'd taken my knickers off so I could do it as quickly as possible when he was ready. However, he couldn't do it. It wouldn't work. He came out wrapped in a towel. He needed something to get him going. I couldn't waste this opportunity to get pregnant. You must understand that? No, I don't, Kaz, really I don't. So, I lifted my skirt and showed him. I'm sorry, but I needed it to work. He started to get hard. I could see it under the towel. I turned around and told him to put it inside me. I thought that if we did it doggy style and I couldn't see his face, I could pretend it was you. So that would be okay. But it wasn't okay, Darren. It was awful. The worst sexual experience of my life. He was smaller than you, of course. He was useless. He seemed to have no idea what he was doing. How he could father 3 daughters, I don't know. He had nothing on you. After he came, he sat at the end of the bed and cried. I thought it was guilt over what we'd done. Guilt over you. I put my arms around him to tell him it was okay. And he kissed my cheek and said, "That was the most amazing thing ever. I never knew it could be like that. So good. Thank you." As he sobbed in my arms, this big, strong man, just like you, I couldn't believe it. He thought it was good. He was thanking me for the worst bit of sex ever. I don't think I've ever felt guilty about anything in my life. He'd just risked his marriage, his family, and his friendship to give us our family. I owed him, so that's when I decided to thank him properly. I didn't plan it. It just happened in that moment. It wasn't about you or me. It was something separate. I didn't love him or care for him like that. It was a mixture of gratitude and feeling utterly guilty towards him. He had the family we so desperately wanted, but he didn't have the love we had. He didn't really know anything. So, now we're moving on to pity. I suppose you could say that if you're going to be so crude. I kept holding him, rocking him, and he rested his head on my chest. I lifted one breast out and let him suckle Darren as if he were my child. I was really just comforting him, that's all. Only then did I start to teach him about sex, like you taught me. The only difference was you taught me how to make love. This was just sex, the mechanics of good sex. No love, I promise you. It was true, I did things he hadn't experienced with Kate, and I enjoyed his pleasure, just as you enjoyed mine so many times. But it wasn't about me, it was about him. I never did anything for him that I hadn't done with you. Reassuring. You always made sure, whenever we met, that you came home and made love to me. You couldn't bear the thought that I was missing out on anything. I always had the same thoughts back then. But I didn't have the same thing, did I? I had the bad end of the bargain. He still had a faithful wife, and I had a shag-aholic on the side. I stopped as a terrible thought came into my head. You let me eat you out, knowing you'd been satisfied by his stuff? Darren, it wasn't like that. I was giving myself back to you, to your husband, by giving me a taste of your lover's sperm. This time, I made it to the sink as I started to vomit. As I was trying to regain my composure, I splashed some cold water on my face and turned back to ask her another question. That's when I spotted Scott in the doorway, phone in hand. He held up a finger to his lips and slowly backed away from the door. I'm not sure how much of this he needed to hear, but I trusted him to do the right thing. Kaz, I bet you laughed at me, made me a cuckold, made me feel small. No, Darren, no. We never did that. We both loved you so much. In fact, it would have been easier if we didn't talk about you when we met. I told Angus right at the start that if he ever asked for a comparison between sex with him or you, he would always fail, so he never did it again. So Scott was right. It's still going on. It wasn't just a one-time thing, was it? Kaz looked at me. Would it make a difference? I shook my head. Yes, it's still going on, but not for that long. The first time I got pregnant, I felt it. I just knew. They say some women know, and I knew. When I came home to you that night and we made love, it felt different too. I actually relaxed and just enjoyed making love to my wonderful husband. I wasn't worrying about getting pregnant. It had been a long time since we'd made love without the end goal being that. Just loving you, Darren. You're the only man I've ever loved. I've only ever made love to one man, you. So why did you continue? Was it some sort of training exercise for you? Oh, I had to. We wanted another child, so I had to keep trying with him. When Scott was about 8 months old, we met in Leeds. It's where we always met. Never the same place twice. We were careful. Angus managed to escape when things settled down after Jake was born. Leeds was ideal because it was in the middle, about an hour and a half from home for both of us. As long as we were lucky with traffic, everything was good. We were good until you had to ruin that bloody family genealogy rubbish. I don't even think about blaming me for being a cunt. I don't deserve this. I did everything I could to make you happy. Wasn't I a good husband, a loving husband, a good provider? You were a fantastic husband, the best. You were my whole world, but you couldn't give me what I really wanted, another child. I gasped, shocked that she actually could say that. I knew that's what you wanted, and I found a way to fulfill that for you. Stunned, I just stared at her before I started clapping, giving her a round of applause. Oh, good job with your solution. Nice not having my house full of kids, right? The big family we always wanted. We kept trying until you were 45, right? Then we realized and accepted that it wasn't going to happen. How long did you continue to try with Angus? A bit after we stopped trying with you. Probably a few months. Are you seriously telling me you continued to have sex with your supposed best friend for a decade? God, I must be the biggest fool in the world. A complete moron. I wasted my life. All lies. I collapsed onto the nearest chair, and Kaz came over as if to comfort me. Don't come near me. Don't you dare touch me. Darren, I love you. You didn't waste anything. It was all real. How can you say it was a waste? All those amazing memories, all that happiness, we raised a fantastic son together. No, Kaz, we raised my fantastic son together. I'm just lucky that he still chooses me as his father after all this. Now I knew that whatever happened, he'd always be my son, whether he was biologically mine or not. So you're just going to cut Angus off now, right? Give up all that wonderful illicit sex after a decade? Not like that. As soon as I realized the chances of getting pregnant at that age were so low, I stopped. The sex wasn't the issue. It never was. I had you for that. We've always had a wonderful love life, you know that. Now that's just a hazy memory, Kaz, but I guess I thought so. Apparently it wasn't enough for you. Darren, what I did with him doesn't compare, it can't. It was different, it was separate from us. I won't lie, it did get better. After all, I trained him to do everything I like. Even then, even at its best, it still couldn't compare in any way to you. It can't because he's not you. Suddenly, I was getting old, I got made redundant, and my new job made it difficult to escape the new working hours. Anyway, I started to get bored with everything. I accepted that we only had Scott, and that was the way things were going to be. All those drives for nothing. Sorry that your infidelity has become a burden for you, Kaz. My heart bleeds for you. So, how did Angus take the end of it? This sexual thing. Even if it was bad for you, still brought him to tears because it was so good for him. He had a terrible sex life with his own wife, but it sounds like he had a great sex life with your wife, doesn't it? You're twisting things, Darren. It's not like that. Yes, he enjoys sex, of course he does. He's a man, isn't he? He was genuinely doing it for us, don't you see? To give us another child. He proved that when I told him it had to stop. He was disappointed, but he accepted it had to end. He was sad, but he agreed. That's it then, right? Yes, except for one more time. You remember his 50th birthday? He was very upset about everything. He just asked for one more time. But that time was different. I'm really ashamed of that one. It felt dirty. I knew I was really cheating then. I'm truly sorry about that one. Sorry about that one, his birthday present? Oh, how about another slice of the cake, Kaz? So how many times did you see him over the decade you were trying to have another child? A couple of times a month, 3 or 4 times a year when I was most fertile. I paused for a moment to think about this. So, you've slept with him around 40 times, maybe more because you might have done it more than once? You make it sound cheap and tawdry. It is, Kaz. Cheap. You made it cheap, just as he made you cheap. Don't you find it strange that he got inside you twice the first time and his super sperm made you pregnant immediately? Then he slept with you about 50 times when you were most fertile, and it never happened again. Oh, I suppose it was me and I never gave up hope that it would work with him or with you. Thanks for thinking of me in this baby-making thing. Yes, I could still get you pregnant. Maybe you? Sadly, Kaz, there's some shocking news for you too. Oh, it can't compare to you tearing my whole life apart, but you'll find it interesting. Sadly, Kaz, you have no hope of getting pregnant with Angus again. Just before Jake was born, he had a vasectomy. He only told me. Actually, I picked him up and I was giving him a lift. He pleaded with me not to tell anyone. Actually, I felt bad keeping it from you, but because I was sure it didn't affect you in any way, loyalty to my friend took precedence. Even Kate doesn't know. He knew it wouldn't sit well with her church beliefs. He'd have 4 kids under 6 years old. He couldn't risk any more children. So no, Kaz yelled. So he's not trying to get us another child, he's just sleeping with a stupid, willing tart. A cheap shag for him, who only cost the price of a hotel room. I bet he got some real bargains online for those cheap rooms? I mused. I continued, undeterred by her shock. A tart who doesn't think much of her marriage vows. Who doesn't think much of the husband who seems to be her whole world, so much so that she lies and deceives him for 21 years? You killed that love the first time you met him in that hotel room, even before you slept with him. You deceived me, destroyed the trust we had. What you did after that and continue to do is downright evil. If that's your idea of love, you can keep it. Kaz looked at me with shock, as if the thought that she was finally telling the truth would absolve her of all previous wrongdoings and lead to her forgiveness. I couldn't believe the woman I'd loved and respected could be that stupid and not understand the depth of her actions against me and our family. You weren't cheating on me because of what you wanted and needed. It had nothing to do with me. You had your ego stroked by a man who thought you were some sort of sex guru. Don't tell me you were still trying to get pregnant. I think you enjoyed the secrecy, the lies, and making me feel small. I'll never forgive you, Kaz. Never. Get out of my sight, I don't want to see you again. As she turned to leave, she finally saw Scott standing in the doorway. How much have you heard? Enough to know that my mom is a selfish cunt. Scott, please, she whimpered. No, before you go, you better hear this. I went to see your lover today. I had to set off really early. I didn't expect it to take so long. I didn't think it was fair that he could ruin our family and get away with it. I also wanted to let him know that I would never see him again and make sure he knew I had a father, and his name is Darren. He seemed a bit shocked to see me at breakfast. He was worried it was bad news. So well, it was for him. By the way, Mom, Aunt Kate really wants to talk to you. She's quite pissed off with you. So that was before she knew the full story. Luckily, she'll get to hear most of your confession to Dad because I thought it would be wise to record it for her when you were talking. I'm sure she'll want to listen too. Kaz was just stunned as Scott continued his tirade. At least you're finally being honest. Angus decided to try the lying thing. Apparently I'd been injected with a turkey baster and he was just trying to help. No sex at all. I told Aunt Kate I didn't think that was quite true. Rian seemed the most upset. Turns out she'd been crushing on me for years, and if I'm honest, I was feeling it too. Thank God we never acted on it. Mom, you can add incest to your list of sins? Then he turned to me. Dad, I also took the liberty of punching your old best friend in the face pretty hard. Just one punch, but I did it for you. I know you couldn't risk a charge of assault and losing your job. I think I'm safe because he wouldn't dare report it, especially as I'm sure Aunt Kate did more damage when she kicked him in the balls. He turned back to his mother. You still here? At least you have a place to sleep tonight. Angus is probably at the BB now. Kate kicked him out. I gave her your flat address. I hope she comes to visit. I knew I could never get over the betrayal. She'd always been on my team, we were a unit, and it was heartbreaking to realize that she wasn't standing by me. So the sexual part of the relationship was bad enough and enough to end us, but what really broke my heart was the thought of him holding her, stroking her hair, telling her she was beautiful. Those moments of intimacy and affection which I thought were just part of us, part of the special magic we shared. It was those thoughts that kept me up at night for weeks to come as I began to face my new reality. I felt I would never be good enough again. She'd chosen someone else to give her the precious gift I so badly wanted to give her, but she was too selfish to make time for me. I'd trusted her with my whole life, and losing that trust changed me in ways I never could have imagined. When I thought about them being together all those times, I thought about how little we had been together for the past few years. It was obvious Kaz had decided her sex life was over. She'd made that decision without thinking about my needs or feelings in that situation. It was a ridiculous thought, but I couldn't help but think that if her sex life and desire were finally waning, it was a shame she had wasted so much on him. It wasn't fair. Nothing was fair. I guess you're wondering what I did with my old friend? I did nothing for about 6 weeks. I talked to Kate and even met her when she came to visit, but I knew that if Angus approached me, I wouldn't be responsible for my actions. He was blocked everywhere. I know that, like me, Kate filed for divorce. I also know that none of his kids speak to him. The girls were mad enough, but Jake was the worst. He's only spoken to his dad once, and that was to tell him he wished I was his dad. I'm sure that hurt. Good. All the kids contacted me in some way to check in to see if I was okay. I was worried about Rian because she was struggling the most with it. I think her feelings for Scott were stronger than she let on, and finding out they shared DNA shocked and horrified her. Kate and I had a long talk. She loved Angus but found him incredibly difficult. She told me she felt he was like another child to look after, and his selfishness at home when he was on his own was astonishing. She felt he wasn't supportive as a father and only really put in the effort when someone else was around, especially me and Kay's. We both agreed that we'd done a great job of deceiving each other and none of us had a clue anything was going on. But why did we have to? We were both faithful wives, although I was happier than her. We trusted them, and that was the main thing. They took advantage of our love, trust, and faith in them against us. Kate and I will remain friends, and I have to say she seems a lot more comfortable without the pressure from Angus. At this point, I hope I'm in for the long haul with her and her kids' lives. I saw Angus one more time just before Christmas. I went to visit Kate, Jake, and the girls. I needed to see them all and let them know. I wanted to see Angus one last time to tell him that I hated him for ruining my life. I wouldn't listen to his excuses, but what good would that do? What I didn't expect was for him to be so smug. What I thought he might try to apologize, but no, maybe he knew it was pointless. Maybe he blamed me for everything he lost. After all, he got away with it until I found out the truth. So, I slept with your wife and gave her what she really wanted, a child. I can't change that, there's nothing I can say, and what good would it do? I know you hate me, and I don't blame you, but I don't regret it. They say when you're on your deathbed, you regret the sex you didn't have. Yeah, the only amazing sex I've ever had was with Kay's, not with cold, boring Kate. No, I didn't love Kay's. That was your job, but I really enjoyed the sex. I liked how she made me feel. I knew I had to lie to her to keep it going. Even now, all alone in this mess, it was worth it. Even hurting you, my oldest friend, it was worth it. Knowing Scott is mine made it worth it, too. When he finished, I just showed him my phone. I showed him the notification that pinged in my inbox from the ancestry company the day before. It said Scott was my son. What a wonderful Christmas gift. I think it was the best gift for Scott and Ryan, too. 5 years on, my life is a far cry from what I ever imagined. Kays and I, of course, divorced. Although I can now share a room with her if I have to, I don't choose to. We've never really had a proper conversation since her confession. What's the point? She tried to go to the school a few times to try and see me, but I soon put a stop to that with a short, sharp restraining order. She thought that once I knew Scott was really mine, there might be a chance for us to reconcile. It turns out she knew me as little as I knew her. We communicated through lawyers until our divorce was finalized. I kept the house and Kaz got 2 rental flats. They were roughly equivalent in value to the house, and she could get an extra income from renting out one of them this way. The 3rd flat was to be sold, and we'd split the proceeds, but we eventually agreed through the lawyers that we'd give that flat to Scott. I think we were both happy with that. Scott moved into that flat, and for a while, when Jake was doing his master's locally, he moved in with me as a surrogate son. I wasn't doing a great job of being independent, so I was grateful for his presence. Scott and I are still very close. He loves his mother, and she's always been in his life. He might love her, but I doubt he likes her much. He feels she deceived him and our family as much as she deceived me. She lives on her own. She claims she hasn't dated. I suppose it's not easy when you don't want to have sex. Maybe she'll find someone to be her companion eventually or adopt a cat. Angus finally moved to Spain. Ruth is the only child who visits him. She says he's very self-pitying and drinks too much. He seems pretty bitter about how it all worked out for him. Apparently all that screwing wasn't worth it in the end. Good. As for me, tonight I'm sitting around the table with my new wife, my son, and my daughter-in-law. I'm holding the most beautiful granddaughter ever on my lap as we eat. Kate's here too. No, we're not together. That's never going to happen. But she's met someone, David, but he's working away tonight. He's a good guy and makes her very happy. No, Kate's here. Not just because she's now my oldest friend in title, but because we share Lucy, our granddaughter. Ryan and Scott got married very quietly a few years ago. When they figured out they could be together, they didn't waste any time in acknowledging their true feelings. They got married quietly, partly because that's what they wanted, and partly because Ryan has distanced herself from Angus and refuses to have any relationship with Kaz. I'm sad to admit that this makes me very happy. Ryan is okay with Lucy seeing her grandmother when Scott visits, but she will never be welcome in their home, and she will never be allowed to care for Lucy on her own. The real joy in my life is my wife, Abigail. When I was at my lowest and had no confidence, she swooped in and helped me feel better. She was a supply teacher at the school, and we just hit it off. We fell for each other quickly, and I soon rediscovered the joy of sex with someone who wanted you as much as you wanted them. We got married after 18 months and are blissfully happy. We're enjoying retirement. Abigail's a widow with no children, and therefore thinks the sun rises and sets with little Lucy. She admits she never thought she'd experience the love of a child and be called Nana. She's so happy to be sharing her life. Scott told me that Kaz is very bitter that Abigail's enjoying her retirement with her husband, son, and granddaughter. As Scott put it, "Whose fault is that, Mum? Certainly not Abigail's, certainly not Dad's, and certainly not mine." You can't argue with that. Thanks for listening, folks. Let me know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.